What a very warm welcome, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Man to Man podcast show. My name is Cassim, and once again, truly want to welcome you to the podcast. And I just want to firstly start off by saying thank you very much for joining me on this, what seems to be a very wet day today, actually. I seem to love this kind of weather when it's raining and it's been a little bit warm because it gives me an opportunity to go running. And I always find that running in when it's been warm but it's still raining, I absolutely love that. And it's one of my favorite times to run. But anyway, point being is, thank you very much for joining me. I really appreciate it. I hope that I can share some things with you today in the podcast that you can find useful. Just to give you a bit of a relay of some things I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about a quick. So I'm going to break today's podcast up into two parts. I'm going to spend the first part of the podcast essentially talking about the three keys to success. Basically, very many people in my life come to me many times and they don't want me to give them a long explanation of how to become successful. They kind of want a 1, 2, 3 ABC kind of step. Cassim, give me how to be successful in 3 steps. Give it to me in 3 words. That kind of thing. And so I've been trying to figure out essentially a very simplistic version of 3 keys or 3 principles of how to become successful, and I'm going to share a little bit about that with you in the first part of the podcast. And in the second part of the podcast, I want to talk to you about a movie that I watched yesterday called Amateur, and some of the things that I took away from that movie, because I think it might be useful for you in your own life, especially if you're a guy. You guys know that I intended this podcast primarily for men to have a conversation where we can talk man to man. So I'm keen to share those two kinds of parts of the show with you today, and I'm really hoping that something that I share with you today might be able to maybe guide you or maybe trigger something in you that can help you to become a higher, fuller expression of who you're capable of becoming. Right, so let's talk about the first part of the show, which is, or the podcast this week, which is around the 3 principles to success, a simplified version of how to become successful. So many of you will know for the last 6 years, about the last kind of 6 years or so, I've spent that time trying to figure out how somebody gets from the bottom to the top. How did Arnold Schwarzenegger do it? How did Oprah do it? Right? How do you become Mr. Olympia having started from nothing, having started from adversity? I wanted to know, how do Premier League footballers make it even though they've come from a country which is poverty-stricken like Africa? How do they do it? I wanted to understand, how does somebody start from the floor and get to the top? How does somebody come from a council estate and get to the point where they're living in a 4-5 bedroom detached house with gates? I wanted to know, and that's basically what I've been studying for the last six years. Individuals who've done that, and I've been trying to figure out what have they done, how did they do it. And so I've got a number of principles that I like to share with people. And if you actually look at one of those principles, on Sundays, I hold a goal-setting workshop. And the reason why I hold that goal-setting workshop on a Sunday is because I realize the importance of one of the keys to starting from the bottom, which is you have to be very clear on wherever it is that you're wanting to go. So that perfectly leads me onto these 3 principles, these 3 keys to success. So many times people will come to me and they say to me, Cassim, I just want you to give me a quick version of how to become successful. I don't want the long version. Just give it to me in a 1, 2, 3 step. Just give it to me in an ABC kind of way. Don't convolute it. Just give it to me like that. And I've been trying to figure out a way in which I can articulate that with you. So if you're here for those 3 keys, let me share them with you. They're very simple, and here they are. The first thing that you want to do, if you want to start from the bottom and get to the top, is decide what you want. Decide where you want to go. Decide who you want to become. It's really as simple as that. The second key, or the second principle, is go after it. It's really as simple as that, right? Just go after it. And the third thing that you want to do is not to stop until you get it. Now, I wanted to give you that quick, simplistic version for those of you guys who just want the ABC, who want the 1, 2, 3 version of this, and you just want an answer, and you just want to know, Cassim, give it to me. Essentially, if you want anything in life, anything any objective, any outcome, any external goal, anything that you want in your life, if you follow those 3 steps, you will almost guaranteed to get them. Now, obviously, me saying there's a guarantee, of course, I can't guarantee anything. There is nothing. No one can guarantee anything in life. Things can go wrong, obstacles can get in your way, whatever. And that's essentially is what I wanted to now get into to kind of explaining to you. So let's talk about the first one, which is deciding. I would say the single biggest reason as to why most people do not ever rise from the floor to the top, why most people do not reach the higher echelons of success, why most people do not get the things that they want, is single-handedly because those individuals never make the decision to do it. Now, obviously, a lot of people who find themselves at the bottom usually are in a position where they're forced to have to do it. Look, if you're in a position where, I don't know, a family member of yours is sick and they have cancer and you need money, even if you hate running, you will go out and start running to collect money for charity, right? And that's how essentially most people rise from the floor to the top. But there is, I would say, 90% of most of the people who rise from the floor to the top, they start off by making the choice to do it. Now, this is the hardest one, because deciding means that you have to give up everything else. Now, I know that this sounds very simplistic for me to say this to you, but you don't understand. When you make a decision, you basically have to give or go in. You have to basically say, okay, I'm willing to give up this, and I'm willing to give up that, and I'm willing to not go here, and I'm willing not to go there, because this is the thing that I want. And most people don't want to do that. What else did I say? When you decide, you also accept responsibility. See, the issue is when you make a decision on where it is that you want to go, you inadvertently, without realizing it, have actually accepted that you can do something about your life, that you can do something about the area in which you want to improve. And I know for a lot of you who are listening to me, you may say, Cassim, that's not really a big deal. It is a big deal. It is a huge deal because, guys, you don't understand. Most people spend their lives blaming other people for the reason why their life is worked out the way it is. Most people blame their genes. Most people blame their environment. Most people blame the government. Most people blame their parents. Most people blame their boss. I mean, as simple as, let's just use, for example, the simple example of money. Most people blame their boss or their company for the reason why they're not getting paid enough money, basically. Those individuals never take the responsibility to say, actually, look, the company that I work for is paying me an amount of money based on the value that I provide to them in the time that they've given me. And that if actually I was a lot more valuable, they would pay me more money, because there are other people who work in the same company as me, who work exactly the same hours as me, but they're being paid more money. So the problem isn't that the company won't pay me more money. It's just that in the eyes of the company does not believe that whatever I'm offering, whether it be a service, whether it be sales, whether it be marketing, whatever it is that I'm trying to offer the company does not believe in its opinion that I am worth how much I think I'm worth. So this is a typical thing that a lot of people tend to go through, where when they want more money from their life, and that is kind of the objective or the goal that they want, do you know what they will do? They will go from job to job, from job to job, and try to basically get somebody to pay them money for which they are not offering the value for. Instead of growing themselves to the position where they are worth what it is, the money that they think they're worth. So many of you guys who are listening to me, You cannot, honestly, you will find it very difficult to find a way to try to persuade me that the amount of money that you are earning right now every single year is really how much you are worth a year. You would be hard stretched. I mean, you would have to go miles to give some incredible evidence to prove to me that the amount of money that you earned last year was really all that you're really worth. Because most of you guys who are listening to me, you are worth considerably more than that. Considerably. I mean, most of you guys who are listening to me, you are every single year, in terms of the value that you're able to provide, you're easily millionaires. Every single year, the minimum you should be making is easily £1 million. Now, obviously, you don't believe that, and we're going to get into that in a moment. But this is part of the reason why most people struggle with this first part. Because if you believe you're not worth £1 million, are you ever going to make the decision to even go for the kind of job that would be worth £1 million? Of course you're not, right? And so most of us don't take responsibility because, sorry, we don't set the goal, or we never decide, because deciding means we have to take responsibility. The other thing that taking responsibility does is, when you take responsibility, expectation costs. When you begin to expect something, it costs you something. You know, it's very, very, very easy to not expect anything, because if you don't expect anything and you're a pessimist and the world is bad and the government's bad and bad things always happen to you and you've got bad luck, then you don't have to expect anything. But when you start expecting things, then you start leaving room for disappointment. You start leaving room for people to betray you. You start leaving room for failure, for errors, right? All of these things start coming when you start expecting something. Let me give this to you in an example. Many of you lads don't want to truly give yourselves in terms of love. And the issue is, if you actually start expecting that there is a girl out there who's meant for you, that there is a girl out there who loves you, who can accept you for who you are with your weirdness and your cringiness, if you actually start expecting that there is a girl out there, then you inadvertently start looking for this girl. And what's that saying that girls have? You've got to kiss a lot of frogs before you get to the prince. I think that's a saying, something on those lines. If I'm wrong, you can write it down, but I think the saying is something like that. Yeah, comment it below as well. I'd love to hear. And so if you start expecting, that's what happens. You now leave room for girls to disappoint you, for girls to let you down. You're going to go on Tinder. You're going to go on POF. You're going to go on Match.com, and you're going to try to put yourself out there, and people are not going to like you. And you're going to go on dates and pay for everything and invest in a relationship, but the girl's not going to reply to you. That is a cost of expecting something. If you actually start expecting that you're going to earn a lot of money, now you have an issue. Because the issue is, now you have got to fail your way. You've got to learn about how passive income works. You've got to learn about how accounting works. What is a balance sheet? What is net worth? You've got to learn about all this stuff that you had no idea about, which most of us have no idea about, which leaves room for disappointment. That is a problem with expecting things. The other thing that happens when you decide what it is that you want is people start expecting things from you. Now, most of you may not actually realize the significance of the comment that I've just made. But many of you will know that when you start talking about the future and you start talking about how you want to do well, or you want to go on holiday, or you want to go traveling, or you want to earn more money, you inadvertently, without even realizing it, raise people's expectation of you. Most people don't understand that the expectations that most of us live by is actually the expectations of the people around us, our peers, people who love us. And when you start going for things that are beyond where you're at and actually start dreaming for yourself, what ultimately ends up happening is you start raising the expectations of the people around you. People start thinking, oh, I didn't realize you had the money to go traveling. Oh, I didn't realize that you had the ability to go to university. You didn't seem clever to me, and now you've just said to me that you want to go to uni, but you failed your GCSEs when you were in school. You said you were dyslexia, and now you're saying to me you want to write a book. Wow, okay, this is interesting. Now you begin to raise people's expectations about you, which I know that sounds okay, but becomes a major issue for a lot of people. And the other major thing that happens, by the way, which is perhaps one of the biggest things that happens when you start expecting anything, is enemies start to appear. And this is one that most people don't really get until they decide. When you start deciding on what you want, enemies start to appear. Critics start to appear. Your mum starts coming out of the woodwork and says, you want to find somebody to marry because you want kids? Come on, son. You've gone through, like, since I've known you, since you started dating, the longest that you've ever been with a girl, and you always bring them around this house, and the longest that you've ever been in a relationship with anyone is like a month. And now you're saying to me that you want to get married, that you want to find a wife, that you want to have kids. Don't be so ridiculous. Babes, listen. You said for ages that you don't really want to get into running your own business, and you don't like people who, that running your own business is really risky. Now you're saying to me you want to leave your really secure job and you want to go and start your own business. Babes, come on. This is ridiculous, right? You love the fact that you get your pension. You love all these things. And here's a problem that I think a lot of people don't expect, which is even shocked me at the beginning. The critics and the haters and the enemies do not come from people who don't know you. Most of the hate and the criticism and the enemies that you get usually are people who love you. This was one of the most shocking things for me when I first started studying successful people. Because I was like, for example, I was studying Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Arnold Schwarzenegger wanted to become one of the greatest bodybuilders in history. And his own father told him that if he went down this path, he would be disowned by the family. His own father told him that if he didn't become a policeman, that he would become a failure. Now, many of you who are listening to me would say, oh, come on, Cass, but he's an exception. My parents aren't like that. But here's what I say to you. Dare to dream and watch what happens. I dare you to dream beyond the expectations of your parents and watch what happens. Dare to try to go to university. I dare you. Try to set a goal, if you've ever thought about it, to go to university if you failed your GCSEs. If you didn't do very well, if you didn't do A-levels, try and tell people in your own family that you want to go to university and watch what happens. The rumors will be circulating. The volatility that will be going around your family will be incredible. You wouldn't even believe it. So that's part of the reason as to why people just cannot decide. It's just so difficult to make a decision. And the issue is, until you know where you're going, you then can't figure out a major obstacle, which is how to get there. Right? You cannot figure out how to get somewhere if you don't know where it is you're supposed to be going. You won't even know what you're going to need, right? For some of you, until you've made the decision that you want to go to university or become a lawyer or become a parent, you won't know what books to read. You won't know what courses to go to. You won't know what mentors you need to speak to. You won't know what skills you need to acquire. It's impossible until you've made the decision to actually do it. Right? And that is why I made that workshop on a Sunday, because I realized you can't even move forward until you know where you want to go. That's why that workshop on a Sunday is so important to me. Now let's get into the second part, which I briefly talked about earlier on, which is to go after what you want. Now, if you are brave enough and somehow you've managed to get to the point where you've honestly managed to talk yourself and made a decision and say, do you know what? I am going to go to university because I want a degree. And I don't want a degree to prove to anybody else. I want a degree to prove to myself that I'm not stupid. You make the decision. Do you know what, Cassim? I don't care. I want an ice cream shop in Cornwall. I want it. I know it's going to take me years. I know I don't have the money. I know that everybody's going to dislike me. I know it doesn't make sense. Whatever. I want an ice cream in Cornwall, right? Obviously, I'm just talking metaphorically here. Some of you may want different things, go traveling, have kids, whatever it may be. If you can get to the point where you've stumbled all of those roadblocks and you get to the point of deciding, you now have a major issue, which is procrastination. Here's where most people struggle. This is what I hear on a consistent basis. Oh, Cassim, I'm too old. Cassim, I'll do it next week. Cassim, I'll do it next summer. Somebody says, you know what, Cassim, I'm sick and tired of hating my body. I'm sick and tired of living in a body that I don't love. That when I go to the mirror, there is nothing that I can say that I like about my body. I'm sick of this shit. I want to get to the point where my goal is to go to the mirror and I can confidently say 3 things that I love about myself. That is my goal. Right? Without any hesitancy, I can boldly claim 3 things every single day, 7 days a week that I love about myself. And if that's your goal, you now have a major issue. Because the major issue that you're going to have is you're going to start realizing that you lack in deficiency. What do I mean by this? When you actually decide the way you want to go, you now have a problem that you realize how far away from your goal that you are. Because before, if you've never made a decision, then it doesn't really matter how far away that you are. But when you start actually deciding where you want to go, you realize, holy crap, my attitude at the moment is not very good. I don't have the knowledge. I mean, I remember 6 years ago, I made a decision that I wanted to coach men to become higher, fuller expressions of themselves. And when I made that decision, I was like, holy shit. I don't have the knowledge. I don't have the wisdom. I don't even know the strategies. I wanted to help people rise from the bottom to the top, but I was like, how the hell am I going to get this information? I don't even like reading. But then and for a lot of people, that major stumbling block of lack of deficiency stops them. Because they're like, Cassim, yeah, but it's going to take me like 10 years to get where you're saying. I mean, I am dyslexic though, Cass. And so, like, who's going to help me? How am I ever going to get a degree if I've always been really shit in school? And I don't even like exams. I don't get on very well in exams. How are you even saying, how am I going to do that? So now you have this major problem of how, right? What else does deciding do? Deciding now means that a major obstacle that a lot of people stumble across, which is that you now have to basically change yourself to get what you want. As I say, this is major. Most of you guys know that most people don't like changing. You know it. You know yourself. I know it myself. I hate changing. I want to be right. But here's one of the things that I wrote down as I was preparing for this. Most people would rather be right than effective. Most people, it is actually unbelievable the amount of people who would rather stick to their guns and follow a path which is not working, which is not effective, which is not bringing them what they want, but in their eyes, they're right. Instead of following a path which is different, which is not the one that they originally wanted to go down, but is effective. It gets them results. It gets them to win. This was one of the hardest things that I went through. Because, for example, for me, the life that I had dreamt for myself as Cassim was what I call the Nando's life. Let me explain to you what I call the Nando's life, guys. So the Nando's life was have a really good job, have a nice 1 or 2 bedroom apartment somewhere in Reading in Berkshire where I live, pay off the mortgage gradually, have 2 or 3 houses. Eventually, I'd remortgage my house, my flat, or move into somewhere bigger, rent out my place, have a missus, have some kids, go on holiday 2 or 3 times a year, go camping somewhere once a year, go to Nando's 3 times every single month, once when I get paid, once in the middle of the month, and those 2 times that I've gone to Nando's, well, hopefully I'll get to the point where I've collected enough points to then at the end of the month get like a quarter chicken or a half chicken, because it'll be the end of the month and I'll be probably struggling with money. That was the dream and the life that I dreamt for myself. Now imagine when I got to the point where, I don't know how many of you know what happened to me, but basically I had a bailiff come to my door when I was in there, and I saw my mum crying one evening. And that day that I saw my mum crying, I said, this can never happen again. This can never happen again. I can never allow myself as a son to make my mum cry because of me. Because the disappointment was so... Guys, this is how bad this was. This was so major for me. So my mum usually cooks food. So I have 5 brothers and sisters. There's 6 of us in total. And when I was living at home, my mum used to decide what she was going to cook based on me. My brothers and sisters, in fact, all the time say that I am the favourite. All of them unanimously have always said, Cassim, we all know you're mum's favourite. Obviously, I'm not mum's favourite, in my opinion, but that's what all my brothers and sisters believe. And it was so bad that this is how disappointed my mum was. My mum never asked me for 3 months what I wanted to eat. When that happened, I knew I'd done something bad, right? It was major. So when I got to that point, imagine I dreamt of this life and I'd come to this point and I started asking myself some serious questions because I was like, all right, Cass, let's look at this then. So you've thought that the way to become successful at life is to work really hard. Cassim, everybody knows you for having had 2, 3, 4 different jobs at one time. So clearly you don't lack the ability to work hard, yet you're not moving forward, yet you're in debt, yet you're having all these problems with your relationships. So clearly working hard is, you've got it wrong, mate. It's something like, I was like, Cass, hold on a minute. You thought that the way to be happy in life is to have loads of money. But Cass, you've been at a point where you've earned £70,000 a year. So, and yet you've still not been satisfied. You've still not been happy. So clearly something about the way that you think, Cass, is shit. You're wrong. You're not right, mate. Because if you were right, you would have had this euphoric moment. Everything would be perfect in your life. But it isn't, Cass, is it? No, it isn't perfect at all. And I was like, oh no. So then, imagine that I then discovered that the route and the path and the path that God had for me was to be speaking to you guys. Now, when I was growing up, I moved to England when I was 8 years of age. And I'd spent the first, of course, 8 years of my life in Uganda, in Africa. And so I had a really strong African accent. And when I was coming through school and coming up through school, I used to get bullied for my accent, for the way that I sounded. And so I hated speaking in public. I hated giving my opinions, right? And people will tell you about this. I've never really been very good at articulating what I think. So can you imagine that I discover that actually my destiny was to speak to people and give my opinions and ideas and philosophies? I mean, how ironic does life get than that? It's like somebody who hates singing and finds out that they're a great singer. I mean, can you believe it? It's annoying, isn't it? And so many of you guys who are listening to me, if you actually make a decision, you're going to find that you are going to have to become somebody else. And it's hard, right? You may be somebody who's a complainer, who's a moaner, who loves being pessimistic. And in order for you to become a great father, in order for you to become a great husband, in order for you to become a great leader, to mentor young people, you're going to have to be a positive person, because nobody wants to follow a Hitler, right? We all want to follow Nelson Mandela and Gandhi. Nobody wants to follow a Hitler, right? We follow him because of fear, not because of hope and inspiration. And for you, you may be like, hold on a minute. No, you know, I've got to the point now where I'm sick and tired of other people in my job not working as hard as me and they make it into management. Clearly something about me is, I don't know what it is, but something about me is not helping me get into management. Could it be the fact that I just don't inspire people? Nobody wants to become like me. I smoke, I drink, I turn up, all I talk about is getting smashed, all I talk about is getting drunk, all I talk about is getting like laid and how many girls I've slept with and whatever, and just people don't want to aspire to that. Right? People want to aspire to being better human beings, to being more welcoming, more kinder, more spiritual, more loving, right? Richer in wealth, in money, in spirituality, in love, in emotion. That's what people want to aspire to. And I wonder, do I need to change some aspects of myself? See what I'm saying, guys? This is a level of deepness that I'm talking about. So the other thing that also happens is well, let's stop there on that one because I know I'm running a little bit of actually behind time, and I really want to get to the second part of this. So let me give you the third thing that you're going to have to struggle with, and is one of the third keys to success, which is that don't stop until you get it. So far we've talked about number one, make the decision about what you want. Number two, go after it. Now the third thing that, and if somebody's coming to me and saying, Cassim, give me the three keys to success, this is the third thing that I would say to them. I would say to them, whatever it is that you want, do not stop until you get it. So I've probably read over 1,000 autobiographies. If you ever come where I live, in fact, here's an autobiography just here. Here's one. What's this? Dear Jogba's autobiography. What else have I got here? I've got The Way of Letting Go. This is one of the survivors of the Holocaust. What else have I got? I've got so many autobiographies. That's my journal. I've got Peter Jones's autobiographies. That's an autobiography I have to read. I've got Davina McCall's autobiography here. What else have I got? I've got Simon Cowell's. So you can kind of tell the sort of people that I study, right? These aren't people who are necessarily like the most good-looking, the most fanciest, the most like. They're basically underdogs. People who you would like. You look at Simon Cowell and you wouldn't think, oh, instantly he's going to become a multi-millionaire, that he's going to have one of the biggest music empires in the world, right? And so what happens is, when you get to the point where you essentially read as many autobiographies as I have, certain common denominators begin to appear. And one of those is this phrase, do not give up. I can almost guarantee you will not find an autobiography of anybody who started from the bottom who does not use that phrase in their autobiography. Do not give up. Do not stop going after your dream. Keep going. It is a common phrase, and there is a reason why it's a common phrase, guys. Because when you start going towards your goal, everything in the world starts out to come and get you. It's so funny. It's like one of the things that I say to leaders when I coach leaders is that if you truly want to be a leader, if you truly don't want to be a sheep and you want to become a lion, here's what I say to them. All visions will be tested for authenticity. If you truly say, oh, Cass, honestly, I want to be a great father. All right, fine, no problem. Do you know what the word goes out to do? It goes out to say, prove it then, motherfucker. Prove it. Let's see then. We're gonna put this in your way. We're gonna challenge you. We're gonna give you obstacle after obstacle. Let's really see how much you want this. And this is where most people fail. That is the reason why most people give the advice not to give up. Because when you start going towards your goal, you just keep failing. You just keep reaching obstacle after obstacle after. I mean, it's like almost ridiculous, right? And it's like, Jesus Christ, can I not get a break, right? And so let me share with you some things that I wrote down here. When you start making progress, it scares people because now they have something to lose. That's one of the things that I wrote down. See, most people don't understand. When you're at the bottom and you have nothing and somebody says to you, hey, Cassim, I beg of you, lend me £50. You'll look at them like they're a nutcase and you say to them, what do you mean? I don't have 50 quid, mate. I mean, I can't even eat fucking McDonald's. I can't even afford to pay my own rent and you're asking me for 50 quid. I don't have 50 quid. Here's what happens. When you buy your own apartment and you have a nice car and you've got promoted in your job and you're wearing a nice suit and you're going on nice holidays, right? And then your mate asks you for 50 quid, how are you going to say no? Your mate knows you have the money. They've seen that you have a good job. They've seen all this stuff. So most people don't even realize that boundaries become a major issue when you start making some kind of progress. And this is stuff that people don't even expect. You wouldn't even think about this. And if you don't believe me, explain to me why so many people who become instant millionaires want to keep the money private. Why don't they want to tell other people that they've become a millionaire? If you don't believe that this is a major issue, why is it? Why is it that people have to get lawyers and put money in trusts? Because people go insane when you start winning. And the other thing as well that most people don't understand, and becomes a major issue the higher up you become successful, is that you start people want to associate themselves with winners. Everybody does. I don't want to be around losers. I want to be around winners. I want to be around people who are moving. And so what begins to happen is the lines between who's my mate, who isn't my mate. What are the? Well, hold on a minute. You're sending me all these nice comments, but why? Begins to become really blurred, and you're not too sure why people are with you and why they're offering you stuff. And so it is very easy for people to be like, I can't deal with this pressure. You become a manager, you make the decision that you want to help other people, and you become a manager. Here's a problem. You start helping people, and now you build a reputation. You start building a reputation as being somebody who helps people, who gets things done. Now people start expecting things from you. People expect you to produce the same results. And a lot of people in that pressure decide, no, fuck this. I don't want this, man. Like, this is too much. I don't want it. You guys take it, right? I don't want to be a manager. I don't want. In fact, I used to work for Tesco's, and there was a guy in there who I used to work with, and his missus was one of the managers, and he wasn't. But I would see him doing managerial stuff, and so I said to her, I won't mention her name, but I said to her, why is it that your other half is like clearly knows management stuff, but he's not doing it? And she said to me, well, he used to be a manager, but there was so much pressure, and he was constantly being bugged, and when he was at home, he was constantly being asked questions, and he had to do with shit that he just too much. He didn't want it. And that's what begins to happen when you start getting successful, right? You actually start having something to lose. You start making money. People start expecting things from you. The other thing that happens is resentment starts kicking in from other people. When you start accumulating stuff, people will start saying things like, what, so you think you're better than us now? Or, I mean, so they will say to you, oh, where are you going on holiday next year? And you say, oh man, I'm going to Dubai. They'll look at you like, all right, calm down. Just because the rest of us can only go down to Cornwall or to Centre Parks, it doesn't mean you're better than us. And you're like, well, you just asked me where I'm going on holiday. I'm going to Dubai, right? I've worked really hard over the last 2 years to save and get promoted so I can go to Dubai. I'm not trying to tell it to you to brag. That's just genuinely where I'm going on holiday. And that's what begins to happen. You start succeeding in your family and being the first one to get a university degree. Hold on a minute. So do you think you're better than this family? Why do you want to get a degree? Is it, are you saying that because we haven't got degrees that we're better than you? Why are you speaking in this fancy terminology? Why are you? And the other thing is, and this is actually on this topic, which is a thing that I've noticed, when you start making progress, one of the things that naturally you want to do is you want to help other people. And the issue is, and I've had to find this out myself, is unsolicited advice is considered as criticism. Even though you see people who can use your help, who can benefit from your knowledge, who can benefit from your connections or whatever, people actually usually don't want it. Because they're like, you think you're better than us? Of course. Well, what do you mean? I don't want to go to uni. Even though you've been complaining for the last year that you don't have the money or you don't have options, and you're like, well, go to uni and you can get options and you can do this and you can do that. And a lot of people just don't do that, guys. They just don't do it. They're just not interested. It's a really funny thing to look at. And the last thing that I wanted to share with you on this topic is one of the reasons why a lot of people never make it and do not get to the point where they achieve what they want is that they get to a point where you have to let go of dead weight. And many of you have heard me use a phrase which many of you hate, which is birds of a feather flock together. If you hang around with the losers, you will end up a loser. It was interesting. I was studying people who had become cocaine, like who'd left being cocaine addicts. And one of the things that was really fascinating for me is that part of the reasons why a lot of people who've been coke addicts or heroin addicts eventually end up relapsing isn't because of their own choice, but it is because of other people. It's because somebody says to them, I really need you to help me get ahead. I really need you to give me somebody's number. They then go to help their mate out or whatever. And that person, they're in a moment of weakness. And whatever happens. And they get triggered and they're back in that environment, which is familiar. And then they have a hit. Oh, come on, man, let's just have one more for old, somebody has quit drinking. They get invited out by somebody. Come on, man, let's just have one for old times. Next thing you know, they've had 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, and they're back into it all over again, right? And so one of the things that a lot of people struggle with is letting go of dead weight, shedding skin, releasing and cutting themselves loose from particularly people who no longer are on the same level as them. And this can be difficult because in some way, and this I struggled a lot with, because in some way it almost comes across as if you think you're better than other people, right? It comes across as if you in some way think that you're superior to other people, that your life is worth more than them. But unfortunately, I came to the realization that if people didn't want to go where I wanted to go, I had to leave them behind, right? Not because I thought I was better than them, but because I believe my life, in my opinion, is worth more than staying where I was. And I actually believe that their lives are of equal value to me. But if they want to stay stuck and they want to stay poor and they want to stay negative and they don't want to succeed and they don't want to fulfill their potential, what else more am I to do? Do I also want to stay in pessimism, in negativity, in being really uncertain, with not having a locus of control, with not doing what I possibly can? Do I really want to stay there? Not really. And so what I would share with you is these 3 things are really the massive reasons as to why so many people struggle. So when people say to me, Cassim, give me the 1, 2, 3 of how to become successful, that's essentially what I say to them. Number 1, decide what you want. Number 2, go after it. And number 3, don't stop. If you do those 3 things, I almost can guarantee you the chances of you getting there or thereabouts to your goal are high. But you are basically going to have to overcome all of the things that I've just spent the last half an hour talking about. And they seem easy. They seem so nonchalant when I say them. But every single one of these things that I shared with you is things that I've had to go through myself. I've had to struggle with writing down what I want. I've had to struggle with changing who I am. And I've had to struggle with letting go of old ideas, of old beliefs, of old attitudes, right? I've really, really struggled with it. I don't know, just something for you guys to think about. So that's the first part of this week's podcast that I wanted to talk about. Now let's get into the second part of the podcast, which is that yesterday I was watching a movie called Amateur. To give you a very brief overview of the movie, basically the movie is filmed from the perspective of a young guy who's an amateur, who's a basketball player, and the boy essentially wants to make it professional. He wants to get to the NBA. He wants to get to the point where he basically makes his dream become a reality. But he's born into poverty. His parents can't pay their rent. All of the usual stuff that follows an underdog and that follows this kind of story. And as I was watching the movie, there were several things, actually 3 things, that I took away from the movie as I was watching it that I wanted to share with you guys, because many of you lads who are listening to me, these things are going to be relevant for you, and maybe you might find them useful. So let me talk about the first thing, which is this. and you've seen the title of what I named this, which is that a shark will always win in a lake. So that is the first thing that I want to talk to you about. A shark will always win in a lake. So when I was watching the movie, you've got this young boy who in his school is clearly a lot more talented. He clearly is a lot more gifted. He clearly works harder than everybody else, outworks anybody else, loves the sport more than anybody else, actually dreams of making it, but a lot of other people don't. Right? And the issue was that he got to the point where he had to come to the realization that whilst he was amazing where he was, he had to transfer to go and play with people where he had to be at the bottom all over again. He had to basically go to a bigger university, which is called Liberty University in the film. But when he went to that university, he was back at the pecking order. One of the things that I say to people loads, particularly guys, is one of the reasons why a lot of guys don't succeed is because they don't want to be seen to be starting small. So many people would rather be a shark in a pond where it's warm, they're the top dog, they win, now let me bring it home. Many people who are listening to me, lads, you would much rather be the cleverest person in your group, be the most organized, be the person who's earning the most amount of money, who's the person who goes on the best holidays, who's the person who's the most intellectually sort of guided in your group. But you have no external stimulation, but you're not growing. In fact, in Tesco's where I work with a girl who recently was, for the last kind of 5 months or so, she has found it really difficult to find work and she's been forced to come and work in Tesco's. She was some kind of software engineer or something like that. And I was talking to her and I said to her, look, you seem really unhappy all the time. What's going on? And she said to me, this was on our break, and she said to me, well, yeah, because I used to love my job, and the job that I was doing, I used to all the time be thinking, and I used to be creative, and I used to think outside of the box. But here in this job is repetitive. I don't exercise any of the skills that I have. I don't exercise any of my degree, which I spent loads of time going to get. And I just feel useless. And many of you lads who are listening to me, you genuinely are the sharks. If we look at most of the people around you, you are pretty successful. You are the top dog. Like your house is the biggest of all your friends. You earn way more money than all your friends. Genuinely speaking, your relationship is way better than most of your friends. And so actually, you look great because you are competing against chickens. Of course, an eagle in competing with chickens is always going to look good. Of course, a shark competing with a freaking sea bass is always going to look good, right? And so you have to be intelligent enough and courageous enough to get out into the ocean. Because if you really want to exercise how quick you are, how strong you are, how powerful you are, everything that you have, the vigor that you have, you need to get out into the ocean. Which means that you're going to have to start operating and competing and hanging around people who are on the same level as you. This was so fucking hard for me, Jesus Christ. Because when I first started, for example, studying wise people, the likes of people like Nelson Mandela, people like Gandhi, people like Mother Teresa, Desmond Tutu, you have to understand these individuals' intellect is so much more superior to mine, but there was no way that I was ever going to grow in wisdom unless I went up and started to comparing myself and start using them as a guide as to where I want to go. And the other thing that I wanted to tell you is when you are a shark in a pond, what ultimately ends up happening is you actually lower your standards, you lower your skill level to the level of people around you. Many of you guys have heard of that saying that you're the average of the 5 people who you hang around. It's true. You really, really are the average of the 5 people you hang around, right? If 10 of your friends smoke, guess who's going to be number 11? You are. This doesn't mean that there is guaranteed, but there is a high likely chance that you are. What does Denzel Washington say? Denzel Washington said something on the lines of, if you hang around the barbershop long enough, sooner or later you'll end up getting a haircut. It's true, you will, right? So what I would encourage you to do is step outside of your comfort zone, right? Start comparing yourself with people who are way, way above where you're at. I mean, if let's say you're 30 and you already own a house and you're already married and you already have a relationship, your comparison now should be millionaires. Your comparison now should be people who have 10 properties rented out. Your comparison now should be people who've been married for 50, 60 years. It is very easy for you to say and compare yourself against people who don't have a relationship. And this is why I say to people to do the journaling, because you won't even realize that you're doing it. You won't even realize that subconsciously you're actually thinking, well, actually, I'm not doing too well. I mean, me and my missus, we've been together 5, 6 years. We've been married now. We're doing okay. My mate hasn't even got a girlfriend. You won't even realize that you're doing that. But you have to be really self-aware, because the reason why I'm saying this to you is that anything which is not growing ultimately is dying. Right? Anything which is not expanding ultimately is diminishing. If you take a flower and the flower is no longer growing, by definition, it starts dying. It starts to decay. If you take your arm and you put it in a cast and you leave it there for 6 months, you will not be able to use that same arm in the same way as the one that was free. Anything that is not growing will ultimately diminish. And I want to ask you to exercise everything that you've got. Exercise your willpower, exercise your love, exercise your mentality, your discipline. Really just push everything out right to the edges of your capacity. That's one of the things that I wanted to share with you. Don't be a shark in a pond. Go out into the ocean, right? Compare yourself against the big dogs. That's what I would recommend to you. Second thing that I wanted to share with you is, if you use maths and odds to determine your chances of making it from an amateur to a professional, you won't make it. Many of you guys who are listening to me, you've heard me talk about the fact that people support an underdog. Everybody supports the person who has struggled with alcohol but wants to get off alcohol, who struggled with their weight but wants to get onto the other side of vitality with their weight. Somebody who's struggled with their mental health but they want to be a good person, they want to get on the other side, right? If any of you have ever watched athletics and you've seen people racing, we would rather support the person who's been losing the race, but then comes from behind. There's one person who's been winning, up front, doing amazing. We would rather support the person who's been losing the race most of the time, but is now gradually making their way towards us. As we get closer to the finish line, that person starts making their way closer and closer to the front of the line. That is a person who we all support. Why? Because we love, as human beings, an underdog. I wonder whether you're an underdog in your life. Whether you are at the point where you're constantly the person who's at the back, where you're constantly the person who's a learner, who is the student all over again, to the degree that people want to support you, people want you to do good, right? And I wanted to say this because many of you guys who are listening to me, you've spent a lot of time not being the underdog. And as a result of this, now that you've started to think about things that are beyond where you're at, things that seemed impossible to you before, you've started to crunch the numbers and it's not going to work. No, it isn't going to work. Because do you know what I've come to discover in life? Sometimes you've got to act on faith. Sometimes you've got to act on instinct, on gut feeling. And the issue is, all of the things that I have found that matter in life, the numbers don't work. If you look at the paper and you look at the statistics and you look at the numbers, they don't add up. It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever for a boy like me who grew up in Africa to be really sat here trying to tell you about how you can improve your life. How are you going to go on then? Go ahead and try in some way to give me the figures as to why that could happen. It isn't going to happen. Like if we went back and you were trying to persuade my parents that I would be here talking to you today, there is no way that the maths just didn't work. The odds were against me, right? When I was born in Uganda, and the circumstances that had to happen, and the chances and the luck that had to take place in order for me to be here, sat here talking to you today, is almost unbelievable. And I guess, I was speaking to my brother the other day. Many of you know my brother plays for England. And I was speaking to him, and I said, Bashir, let me ask you a question. We were watching the Liverpool game on Sunday, and I said to him, Bashir, let me ask you this question. What do you think is a thing that separates some people? Like, I was saying to him, when we look at this Liverpool game right now, if I asked you to choose 3 players and name their names, you'd come up with 3 names really quickly. Because they've got something special or unique about them or whatever. I said to him, if we looked at the England squad, there's clearly all of these players are amazing, but there'll be 2 or 3 names that stand out. What is it? What allows for some people to be so unique and like to stand out from the crowd? What is that thing? Why is it what is it? And eventually we led to a point where Bashir was saying to me, do you know what, Cass? One of the things is just luck. He said that sometimes you just have to be in the right place at the right time to meet the right manager, to be in the right team, etc., etc., etc. And he said that many times, if you looked at that person's life at the beginning and you looked at where they came from and you tried to make some kind of calculation, if you based where they were going to end up playing for England and being in a World Cup, if you looked at the statistics would have said that they were never going to make it. So what I'm trying to basically illustrate to you is that many of you guys, you are judging where you are based on the statistics of where you're at right now. Sorry, you're judging where you could end up and who you can become and what you can accomplish based on the statistics and the numbers and the odds of where you started, where you're at right now, people have told you are your odds, where you apparently, based on your trajectory so far, where you could end up. I'm here to tell you that that is not really true. That if you engage faith, if you engage growth, if you engage spirituality, if you engage purpose into your life, see, let me put it like this for you. If you look at the numbers and the statistics, tell me how it is that you're going to measure purpose. Because we know that people who are driven by purpose achieve things that they could not have without being driven by purpose. So how are you going to put purpose into the numbers and the statistics? Answer, you can't. So this is why I say to people, absolutely, you've got to look at the numbers, you've got to look at the figures, you've got to be realistic, you've got to plan your course out based on models and maps and people who've already been where you're at. But also, you've got to be stupid. You've got to act as if you don't know what is possible. It's no coincidence, guys, that people who usually pioneering means do things that are impossible. It's no coincidence that people who pioneer are usually young. The older you become, the more cynical you become. Oh, I've tried that, Cassim, that's not going to work. Yeah, I've seen 10 people try that, Cass, they've all failed. That's the belief system that people start developing the older they get. Young people don't have that cynicism. They don't know any better yet. So all they can do is what? Rely on instinct and what they know. That's it. That's all young people can do. They can, and in fact, that becomes really evident in the movie. As you watch this movie, you've got all these parents and all these adults telling the child, this is going to be impossible, they're never going to make it here, that ain't going to work, da-da-da-da-da-da. But you can see that the child doesn't understand. The child doesn't get that all of this stuff that the parents are talking about. And he's just going on gut. He's like, I can make it. I know that it's possible, right? He's going on his ability, on what he believes he can do. And that's essentially what I would encourage you to do. Really dig down inside of you. As you start adding together your map of where you want to go and who you want to become, start adding in some of the invisible stuff: spirituality, purpose, right? Mission, love. Start adding some of these in, because if you start adding some of these in, all of a sudden the odds don't look as bad as they did prior to adding in instinct, gut feeling. Don't just go on the numbers. The numbers are important, but just don't go on those alone. So the last thing that I wanted to finish off with, and this is perhaps probably one of the most important things that I want to share with you, and I know we're running late on time, my apologies, but you know, guys, how important it is for me to share this stuff with you, is that you want to be very careful that the person you idolize or the people that you idolize do not only show you the polished side of themselves. You want to be able to see the day-to-day side of them. So why do I say this? Many years ago, I made a mistake. And the mistake that I made was believing that everybody who is on television, everybody who is successful, basically is perfect. I didn't know any better. I was naive. As Oprah says, if you knew better, you would do better. Now I know better, but I didn't know better then. I just presumed if my friends have a really good relationship and they're posting pictures of themselves on a holiday and they're getting married and they're having children, I presumed their life was perfect. I presumed they must be doing really well. Until something started to happen as I got older. I started to see friends of mine who I would literally see them on a weekend, and I would see them together and they were kissing and all happy, and then 2 weeks later, they tell me they're broken up. What the hell's going on here? I was like, what the hell's going on? I would see friends of mine who seem to have a really nice car, they seem to have it all together, great job. The next thing I hear is that the person is in debt. They've got a gambling problem. They're alcoholics. They've just been fired from their job. And I'm like, what? What the hell's going on here? And what I basically learned, particularly when I start, because hold on a minute. Let me just go back a minute. In order for me to get a map, so at the beginning of today, I shared with you that one of the keys to achieving success is that you need a map, you need a model. The quickest way to basically figure out the how of how to get to where you want to get to is to find somebody who's already been there. That's the quickest way. If you want to know how to get from Reading to Nottingham and you cannot use a sat nav, right? The quickest way to figure out how to get there is ask somebody who's driven there before, because they'll be able to give you a rough route. They'll be able to say, well, you jump onto the A329, you then jump onto the M4, from the M4 at junction 11, you jump onto or the M40, They give you a rough kind of map of where you want to get to. Here's the mistake that I made, and this is where I learned. Be very careful that the model or the person who you're following, you look at the day-to-day lives. And the reason why I say this is many of you guys, for example, you idolize your parents, but you've only seen one side of your parents. Your parents have only ever shown you the good side of their marriage. Many of you who are listening to me, you love your boss and you idolize your boss and your boss has loads of money. But my question to you is how is your boss's private life? For example, I used to work somewhere and I used to idolize one of the people. I don't want to get too much into the details of these individuals, but I used to idolize an individual. And one day I went up to London to a steak restaurant because I love steak. And I went up to London to a steak restaurant. I was in there with my missus. And when I was in there, I saw him. Now, this man was married with a daughter who was like 16 years of age. Amazing wife. I've met her. She's a really nice, incredible woman. I've met his kids, like really nice people. I went up to London. I'm in this steak restaurant. And I think, that guy looks familiar. And he was in there with... the girl was probably maybe 24, 25. This is a married man who works for a big organization. And they were kissing. So this is how, basically, that event was a major event for me. Because I was like, idolizing somebody, basically just because somebody is successful in one area, it doesn't mean that they've got everything else together. That just because they seem really perfect, it doesn't mean that they don't have flaws. And I want to see, what is their day-to-day life like? What is their character? What do they believe in? What is their philosophy? Because that's really what they're like. That's really what's guiding them. And if I'm not careful and I follow their behaviors and I follow their map and I follow their habits and I follow what they're doing, inadvertently I'm going to pick up and start to emulate their behaviors, their attitudes, their philosophies. And are those the philosophies that I really want? Some of you guys, let me give you a perfect example of what I mean by this. So I can now say this because I no longer work for this company, but I used to work for Co-op. And part of the reason why I left Co-op was, when I was doing my exit interview, my boss said to me, "Why are you leaving?" And I said, "Do you honestly want to know the answer to this question? Really?" And she said, "Yeah, Cass, of course, tell me." And I said, part of the reason, and is a major reason why I'm leaving, is because the person who is ahead of me, who currently, not you, but the person who is the position above me, which is the next position that I would go into, that person is not somebody who I want to be like. And the only person who can mentor me to get to that position is him. And I don't like the way he behaves, and I don't like the way he treats people, and I don't like his attitudes. And he's already tried to make me do certain things that I don't agree with personally. And so I don't agree with that. For example, one of the things that he said to me was that on your days off, you have an obligation to come into work if something goes wrong, irrelevant of whether you're the manager or not. If the shop needs you, irrelevant of whether you're on holiday, irrelevant. And he said to me that it's written in your contract that if you need, I was like, let's just stop there 1 second. If I'm on my day off and I'm not supposed to be coming in, I don't even have to answer the phone. And he said, yes, you do. And I said, whoa. So if I'm not careful and I accept what he just said, that means when I get to that position, that is a kind of mentality and philosophy that I'm going to develop. But I don't agree with that. He also used to have a philosophy where he would say to me that you've got to cover your own back. And I said, why would you need to cover your own back? He said, so for example, he would say, like, you need to leave notes over everything. You need to write your initials over everything. And I was thinking to myself, hold on a minute. Why would you need to do that? Because if you start doing that, you then create a culture of where people don't trust people. Where it's as if people are out to get other people. I don't want to be a manager and create an environment where people don't trust people and people feel as though when they come to work, they have to do double the work to cover their back. And I was like, that doesn't sound right to me. I don't agree with it. And that's part of the reason why I said to her, I can't be here. Because I'm going to have to basically, he is my role model. He is showing me what, when I get to that position, I have to do. And the other major thing that happened was basically one day he lost a plot at me in front of the customers. And basically we went to the back of the office and I said to him, that was not a good thing to do. What happened? What's wrong with you? And he said, well, I'm sorry that I snapped, but I'm stressed. They won't give me any time to go off on a holiday. My workplace, I have to come in all the time. I have to do all of this work. And I said, I don't agree with what you're saying, because you're saying to me that if you book holiday, that what? The company is going to refuse it. That and then he said, I'm struggling with my mental health and I'm depressed and I'm on antidepressants and the reason why is because of this job. And I thought, fuck. So if I follow his footsteps, I'm basically going to be in that position. That is the life that I'm going to be living. This is part of the reason why I say to people, if you really want to see where your life is going to end up, find people who are on the same path as you. So one of the things that I did was when I was an estate agent, I looked at being an estate agent and I looked at people who were ahead of me. And I looked at, okay, what are they doing? What's their life like? How do they behave, right? And I looked at some of the people who were ahead of me and I was like, this is not good, right? This is not good. I don't like the way their life is, right? They're trapped to the job. I don't want to be like 40 years of age and cannot pick up my kids from school and are trapped in a job where I'm having to work weekends at 40, where I should be watching my son or daughter at football. That's a problem for me. And that right there is where it all, basically, I started really analysing and really studying people who are ahead of me and asking, am I going to want to be there? Do I want to behave like that? Do I want to think like that? And that's part of the reason why I had to change my whole, the way in which I operated my life. For example, I started looking at some of my friends and some of the people who started off where I started off, and I realised a lot of them are basically going to have to rely on the government for money when they retire. And I was like, ooh, that's a problem for me. Because when I started to do the maths and I started to look at how much people actually get paid when they have a pension, I was like, that's nothing. You expect me to work for 40 years and only have like, what, 1,200 quid a month? That's ridiculous. So I then was like, right, okay, so this means I'm going to have to find a different model, because I'm not going to work for 40 years, get to the end, to like the second part of like 20, 30 years before I die and spend it only with 1,200 quid. That's ridiculous. That is not going to work for me. So that is essentially what I wanted to lastly share off with you. And my apologies, I've overrun, but I really want to try and get as much of this stuff to you as I can. Hopefully you found it useful. So that's where we end today. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. I hope this has been useful. What do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? You guys know I'm always keen to hear from you. If you want to support me, you know what to do. Jump on my YouTube channel, Cassimotive. Subscribe to it. That's where I put most of my stuff. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye for now.